Welcome to another edition of How to Build Lifetime Cash Flow Through Real Estate Investing. I'm Rod Khleif, and I'm absolutely thrilled you're here. And I know you're going to get value from the gentleman we're interviewing today. His name is Michael Zuber, and he lives in the Bay Area and has been investing for about 15 years, really one house at a time. And now he's up to 175 doors, and we're going to dig into how he did that. Michael, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you, Rod. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Absolutely, my pleasure that you're here. So talk about how, I know you didn't start in real estate, and I think you've got a compelling story that'll resonate with certainly people in your backyard as to how you got into this business and why you love it.
Yeah. So I as you mentioned, I live in the Bay Area, which means that by default I was in the tech sector. It's just sort of what we do out here. I was an accountant by training, moved out of accounting into some sales roles. And, what really led me to real estate was really a bust in the stock market, right? If you remember the .com era and that sort of capitulation that we had, that sort of caught me. And was rather painful, sort of a six-figure loss. And I realized that was just a big casino and wasn't going to do that again. So I went to the local bookstores and just had to find something. And real estate was the thing. It was real. You could feel it, touch it, see it, improve it. It was an inefficient thing. So you can find a motivated seller and add value and rent it. So it just made sense to my accounting brain. And I've been in love since and out of the stock market entirely since I started.
That's quite a shift from accounting to sales. That's actually very unusual. Typically an accounting person is, they like they're fairly introverted in most cases. Now I'm going to get hate mail for that comment, but it's kind of an unusual shift. I think it is. They're more analytical and so really what that tells me is you've got the best of both worlds there. If you're able, you're a great communicator and you're analytical. I mean, good Lord, this is definitely the business for you. So those of you listening that fit that bill, this is your game. So what'd you get started? Did you get started in single family and where, and just talk about your progression in real estate, if you will.
Yeah. So I guess I'll sort of start with the book said 15 years ago, invest in your backyard, or at least those were the books that I read. And, if you live in the Bay Area today, you're kind of chuckling because there's no such thing as cash flow. Unfortunately, there was no things to cash flow 15 years ago.
Wow.
So it just doesn't make sense. So I had probably a really intense conversation with the wife about 15 years ago about what do we do, right? Because we were stuck. We had some capital. We were ready to deploy it, but we couldn't make the numbers work in the Bay Area. And she was the one, she gets full credit for this, that said, hey, why don't we go look somewhere else? And right away, I knew that I wasn't comfortable given what happened in the stock market being out of state. So we started drawing circles around Mountain View and we ended up in Fresno, California, which is about 2.5 hours from where I am, with being the first market that kind of made sense, right? So we had found a house that rented for $1,100 that we bought for $107,000. You can go look it up on Zillow if you want. It's 1818 Norris Drive East. You'll see that we got it for $107,000. And we ultimately, as we'll get into later, I'm sure, sold that or actually exchanged that for $264 back in 07, 08. But that's where we are, right? We've been in Fresno. Once we sort of planted our flag there, we've never left. All right. We did play with the idea of going to Texas or Nevada or Arizona. But given the struggles we had building a team, I just couldn't imagine doing that again out of state. So we've stayed in Fresno and we started in houses and then, we moved into apartments later.
Did you start with houses? Did you start with plexes? What were some of the first acquisitions? I mean, you started with one house, I know that, but after that, did you talk about your progression in this business? I mean, you've got 175 doors and, pretty valuable portfolio. How did that all come about?
Started with that one house on North Drive. And then we went, one house or so every 6 months. Ended up with 7 houses and a duplex as we exited into 2008, which is what I call my first phase.
Okay. And then, well, let's keep talking about phases then. So you talked about your first phase. What was the second phase? What was the third phase? And what phase are we in right now?
So for me, I look at my career as sort of 4 distinct phases. We've talked about the first one. The second one, if you remember 2008, this is when Countrywide, IndyMac, and everybody was having those fancy loans, the 2 and 28 teaser loans and all of those things. And what happened is prices of single family homes, which I was comfortable with, became too expensive. and the numbers just couldn't make sense. Right. And
Right.
my accounting brain just wouldn't let me buy another one. So we were stuck. And then a friend of mine suggested sort of small multifamilies, the commercial market, sort of 5 to 10 is what we were talking about.
Right.
And that was our second phase. We 1031 out of all the houses in the small multifamilies, 5 to 10 and ultimately up to 18 units right near the peak. So we got all that extra equity out of houses and put it all into apartment buildings. So we went from 8 units to 80 units inside of about 15 months.
Nice. And of course, your timing was impeccable. And who could have foreseen that? You couldn't find houses, so you said, you know what, let's do multifamily, and you couldn't have picked a better time. I mean, you look like a sage, brilliant. You look like Warren Buffett right now. But of course, I didn't get that memo, so I crashed and burned in 2008, and it was ugly. It was ugly, but I call it seminars. I have had many seminars. So that was a $50 million seminar for me.
Ooh.
But yeah, it was painful. So are you still completely vested in Fresno, or is that your core market?
Yeah, we're all in Fresno. I have a place in New York where my daughter lives. We have our primary residence in California or Mountain View, and other than that, our rental portfolio is all in Fresno.
Okay, nice. So, do you manage them all yourself? Did you hire some local management? Let's talk about some logistics for that.
Yeah, one of the things as living 2.5 hours away is I've had a property manager since day one.
Okay.
And that wasn't always easy.
Right. Same person, same one, or have you had to roll through some? Yeah.
I had to 6 in the first 6 years before I landed on a team that I could grow with and has been with me for the last 10 or so years.
You have to kiss a lot of frogs sometimes, but maybe let's talk about now that you know what you know with property managers. Is there something you might have done differently to prevent all that pain 6 times in a row?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I would look for now is the principal of the property manager has to be an investor. Right.
Yeah.
3 of the 6 firms that I worked with were agents,
brokers doing it on the side. Yeah.
Yeah. They weren't investors. They didn't think like investors. They thought transactions. So I would never do that again.
Okay. Yeah. A lot of times you'll hit somebody like that up and they'll sneak in a little clause that if you sell it, you have to list it with them, and they pull that crap. But okay. So definitely the principal is an investor. Anything else that came out of that experience that you could share that might add value to people in the same boat right now?
Yeah, the other thing that I had to do, and again, it's sort of my mix of accounting brain and being an extrovert, is we did some surprise trips. Right, it was amazing what happens when you tell them you're coming.
Right.
Versus the unannounced. Oh, I stopped by.
Right.
And we caught some things that were not very good.
Okay. Okay, just like neglect, or even more nefarious.
We were told units were full that weren't full. We were told that repairs that were supposed to be done weren't done, and suddenly the same water heater is getting replaced twice in a year. It's just
okay, so complete fraud. Yeah, I've had that happen as well. I had some properties in Memphis, and I just got really taken advantage. I mean, I got actually defrauded out of about $100,000 because and I mean that was your whole portfolio. For me, it was like a stepchild, and my dumbass treated it like that, and shame on me, and and I suffered for it. But so let me ask you this: do you think? I think this is a good question to ask you. Do you think there's a particular type of person that's best suited for this business? Because you're kind of an anomaly. So is there, in your view, is there a type?
Yeah, I think, for somebody who's going to be, they have to think long-term. If you are excited by the latest investment craze, whether it was crypto a year ago or pot stocks now or whatever, this isn't for you, right? Because your real estate is not get rich quick, it's get rich for sure.
Right. Oh, I like that. I'm going to steal that. I say it's not get rich quick. It's become very wealthy over time, but I like yours better. Get rich for sure. Okay.
There you
Heard
go.
it first here, guys. Okay.
And so I think it's a person who has a long time view.
Yeah, no
The other,
question.
yeah, the other thing is you have to communicate, right? Real estate is a people business. I didn't get that the first 5 years.
Right.
I thought if my accounting brain built the magic spreadsheet, life would be, I would solve the world.
Thank you for sharing that, guys. And I know there's some of you listening that are thinking the same thing. That I'm really glad you said that. Because it's so true. Yes, you could do that if you stick with houses. But if you start getting into some larger properties, it's a team sport. You know this, Michael. It's the people you connect with. It's the brokers. It's the, of course, the property managers. And I just did a Facebook Live post right before we did this interview, and I talked about this and that, you're building, because it's not a get rich quick thing. It's not the flash in the pan thing. You're building relationships you're going to have for a very long time. So be picky. Find people you enjoy that are reliable. Find them through referrals. That's the best way to find the best people. But you're building lifelong relationships, and you've got to treat this business with that mindset. With that mindset, do you agree with that, Michael?
Oh, absolutely. I can tell you that there's plenty of examples where reputation matters. One of the things that I'm particularly proud of is every deal that we have gotten in escrow and opened, we've closed. And that reputation may not sound like a lot today to people, but it was everything to brokers during the crash, right? We got more.
Oh, it is today too. If you're known as a person closing, you're going to get the deals. I've had people on my show that have 4,000 units, and that's how they live. I had one guy, Keith. I forgot his last name right now, but $1 billion in assets, and he's known as closing. So that's huge. Okay.
Yeah. And, it's important for me because one of the things that my accounting brain won't let me do is won't let me overpay. Right. So I often get outbid by people who, I don't know, just think the property is worth more. And most of the time, or at least some of the time, they don't close. And then I get a phone call and, we closed at the number that I put out there. So
that's very common. And especially in this hot market, you've got to hold your ground. I'm scratching my head sometimes at some of these deals that we're in final LOI stage, best and final. And somebody comes in with some crazy high number above us, and we're like, "Are you kidding me?" Who's doing your underwriting? But more importantly, what the message there is, a lot of those deals come back. And that's the message, because they can't close. The banks aren't stupid, and if they do close, the banks probably end up with that property back anyway when there's a contraction. But yeah, that's how, you want a reputation for doing what you say, and
no question,
and being transparent and honest, and you don't want to be known as the person that retrades every deal, and there are people out there that do that, and
Absolutely.
so. Yeah. So let me ask you this. What do you think is the most challenging part of what you do? What do you love and what do you not love? Let's start with let's start with what do you love, actually. Let's start with that first. About the business.
So when you think about what I spent 15 years doing, right? I was a busy professional. I traveled 100 nights a year, over 200,000 air miles, right? Because I had a worldwide job. So I had to get very good at being focused on what I was good at. And for me, that was two things. It was finding/creating deals and securing capital, whether that was my own or others. Everything else had to be outsourced, right? From property management to insurance to rehab, so all that stuff, right? So I had to be comfortable with what I was good at and comfortable letting go, which wasn't always easy, right? You just had to learn to do that. And so I got really good at what I was good at, and I love that part of it. I love creating deals because I don't think you really find deals. I think you create deals.
Let me stop you there. Guys, what he just said, you want to write that one down, okay? Because so many deals get overlooked And then when you dig in, you see there's potential in some fashion. And if you want, the most successful people in this business are problem solvers. They identify the problem and they solve the problem. Do you agree, Michael?
Oh, no question.
Okay.
You got to be a problem solver. You got to be creative. You have to listen, right?
Right.
It's, we have, 2 ears and one mouth for a reason, right? And unfortunately, that doesn't always happen out there. People like to talk and beat their chest, and I'm just as happy to be quiet and listen for a while. So, yeah, definitely be a problem solver.
And the point there is, if you listen and question, you'll sometimes pick up on motivation that you didn't realize was there.
Absolutely.
Okay? And that's the point he's making there is you may hear something. It's like, wait a minute, the price isn't that big a deal. They just need to close by next week. And so let's put together a solution for their problem.
Or even the opposite of that. I've had, especially in this hot market where, the cash buyers are coming in and promising 10-day closes and all of that. But if they just would stop and listen, they didn't hear the person say, I want my kid to finish school first. Right. I want to move in the summer. Right. So I'm like, okay, great. I'll give you a 60-day escrow, and I'll lower the price, 10 or 15 grand. They're like, take it.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I'm really glad you presented that example as well, because you're absolutely right. It can be the reverse. No, I love it. Fantastic. So what's the most challenging part of this business? And I want to actually, before you answer, I want to circle back to something you said, and that is, you focused on what you were good at, and you recognized where you wanted to get help, i.e. property management in this case. But in some cases, guys, it may be, like Michael here is great at analytics and he can communicate. But if you're one or the other, you align with someone that bridges that gap. If you're the analytical person, maybe you align with someone that builds the relationships and all that, or the reverse is also true. If you're the outgoing person, but you can't even spell spreadsheet like me, then you align with somebody that can. I have a Robert. Thank God I have a Robert, because, I can read them, but I don't love them. So, but anyway, do you agree with that, Michael?
There's no question. I mean, one of the things, that I often get asked is, you're 2.5 hours away from your market. Clearly, you don't mind talking to people and having conversations. Why don't you just move to Fresno? I mean, that's a question I get all the time, especially now since I'm retired. It's like, why don't you just pick up and move?
Right.
Well, the answer is, I've lived in the Bay Area my entire life. I grew up literally 10 miles from where I live now. I've never been outside this area. Right? I went to college at Santa Clara and worked in the Valley my whole life. So I'm not leaving, right? This is home. This is where it is for me. But the reason I get to ask that question is I have actually people in Fresno that are kind of like, feet on the street, right? Helping me network and carry the message forward and door knocking and all of those things. I just can't do that from this far away.
Right.
So I have people that are, limbs or appendages to help me extend my reach as well.
Right.
Today.
Those are the relationships you build and the people you bring in to do these things that you're either not good at, can't do, don't like to do. I did a driving force clip on playing to your strengths, and I do these clips. You probably don't know that I do clips on the motivation. They're motivational, but they're about the psychology of success. And one of them is playing to your strengths. So many people tell you to focus on your weaknesses and build those up. I'm going to tell you the exact opposite. Enhance your strengths and hire, partner, whatever for your weaknesses. So you're going to get much further, much faster. So awesome.
No question.
So challenging. What's the most challenging part of this business for you?
The most challenging part for me is really, frankly, letting go of the details and the kind of, the day to day. And I actually call it the small stuff, right? Don't sweat the small stuff. It took me, it's embarrassing to say, probably a decade to finally get to that point where I'm like, okay, if it's, below $100, don't even bother me. Right. It's, before my accounting brain said, no, you have to have a general ledger. You have the general ledger for every account. It has to credit and debits and it has to tie up to the penny. And I would lose days every month to, reconciling the accounts when, oh, by the way, my property manager was already giving me a report, but I had to do it myself. And
That's a very valuable message as well, buddy. You're throwing some really good stuff out here. And guys, if you're doing something that you can hire someone to do, you've got to look at the value of your time. And, is your time, and even though you're an accountant, Michael, your time probably wasn't best served doing the books. It was out
Absolutely
there making not. And so, guys, those of you listening, what is the best use of your time? I'm going to tell you today, it's finding deals. There's so much money out there looking for a home. Focus on finding the deals, building those relationships, and take a look at what you're spending time with. And this is me looking in the mirror on this one too, because there are things I shouldn't be doing, and still even right now. And so I'm glad we're having this conversation. There are a lot of people that listen to my show that know they want to do this. Maybe they've bought a house, but they have not, gone out there and taken action on multifamily. They haven't bought a Plex or a 5-unit or a 10-unit or whatever yet. What words of advice would you give them? What best advice would you give them?
Well, I think a lot of people that I talk to, and they start talking about apartments, right, or commercial, right, 5 and above. Mm-hmm. I don't know what it is. It's the number, right? It's oh my God, it's commercial financing, so it has to be harder, right? It has to be more complex. And the answer is no, right? If you have done a house, you can do units. It's just more
tenant. It's probably easier.
Yeah.
Since the crash, they've made buying a house, financing a house. Oh my God, they kill a tree when they give you the paperwork. And yeah, and I'm really glad you said that, because I know it seems intimidating, but once you've done one, it's like, my God, was that all there is? And then the first one's always the hardest. It's like the law of the first deal. It's always the hardest, always takes the longest. But once you've done that first 5 to 20 unit, you're like, wow. And then they're like dominoes, boom, and then it's then you realize that there's nothing to be afraid of. Awesome.
Couldn't agree more. The other, just real quick, the other thing I would tell someone to do to get that comfort level is those people probably already have a spreadsheet that compares single family homes, right? They have a list and goes, hey, property on White Street's not as good as Brown Street, that's not as good as Main Street, whatever, right? Go out there and find a 5 or 8 or 10 unit building and just put it in your spreadsheet and just see how the numbers are the same, right? They may be slightly bigger, right? Property manager's slightly bigger. Right. You may pay water and garbage and, these other things, but get comfortable with it at that level. And you'll see it's, you don't add more columns. It's not more stuff. It's all the same stuff. So that's what I
couldn't agree more. Unless you get into larger, like, where you're, but then what you do is you, if you have a 10 unit, maybe you give half a month's rent to somebody to keep an eye on it, and or you get it into a 20 unit, maybe they get a full month's rent off, whatever it is. I mean, you lay it out so that you've got eyes on the property, but that's really the only difference. Between that and houses. I couldn't agree more. So if you could go back, Michael, and tell your younger self, your 21-year-old self, something about this business, what might you say? What might you do differently?
Well, there's a couple of things. I've thought about that a lot, being reflective now. The first thing I would have recognized is I didn't have to come up with all the capital myself. Right. The first 5 years of doing this. Now, granted, I had the most easy financing ever, right? From 03 to 08, if you could fog a mirror, you can get a loan. Right. So it wasn't necessarily a problem, but even back then I could have done a lot more if I had realized that private money or even hard money was out there, right? Because I could have done more transactions. So that's the first thing. Then the thing I'm still grappling with today is anytime I do private money, it's always sort of one investor, one purchase. I've never syndicated or pooled or whatever you want to call that to go after monster deals, right? I have gotten good at my small pond, and I've never looked at transactions over 20 units, and someday I need to grow up and be a big boy and do something bigger.
Okay. Fair enough. So, what do you gift? You get people come up to you and talk to you about this business? Is there a book that you gift more often than not? That's one of the ways that if somebody says, I want to learn this business, say, okay, read this book. And then most of them you never hear back from again. Do that or anything like that?
Yeah. So there's two, right? If they really have been in they're asking intelligent questions, the one I recommend, at least if you're following what I've done, was Fixer J.
Fixer,
right?
what is that?
Fixer J.
Fixer J. Huh.
Jay. He talks about buying multiple houses on a single lot and buying the rundown house and fixing it up. He's done, and I should probably reach behind me and grab one of his books out of my bookshelf. But so he's one of the guys. And the other one is, if you're a busy full-time professional, something I did right when I retired in February was I wrote a little 80-page, free ebook that I just send around to anybody that asks. I don't publish it because I don't want any costs. I literally created a PDF file and I send it via email if somebody.
And what's it about?
So, it's my one rental at a time. It's the 4 phases of my journey plus 23, core beliefs. Many of them we're talking about here. It's only 80 pages, so it's not like it's a big. We didn't circle back. I'll make sure and put the link to that in the show notes. We didn't circle back to the phases. What were those phases again? Yeah, so phase 1 was sort of the acquisitions 1 through 8. Okay. Phase 2 was the couldn't buy anything, so we 1031. We went from 8 to 80.
Went to multifamily. Mm-hmm.
Right, so went to multifamily. So that's where we sort of stopped. So phase 3 is we took about 9 months off. It was the first break we had since we had started as far as acquisitions or 1031ing, because it was chaotic, right? The world was ending, right?
I was under a rock, man. All you saw was the back of my head under a rock at that time for a few months, for sure.
Yeah, so we were just saving cash, probably like most Americans, because we just didn't know what was going on. And then at some point, prices again in my market, because I still watched every day. I mean, that's one thing that people didn't realize is I looked at my market every day and I had no special access. I wasn't a realtor. I didn't have somebody's password. I was on realtor.com looking at stuff. And prices were coming down so fast that we were in it must have been 2009, buying stuff below what my first property was, right? That first property on Norris Drive.
Right.
And I'm like, well, if it was good then, it's got to be good now. So we started buying again, and we, I told my wife, Olivia, that we were going to buy everything we could, because the one thing I read in books, when we started is, people talked about the crash in LA or the Texas one or the SNL one, is they wish they bought more. I was not going to be that person, right? When when they were just leaving diamonds and pieces of gold on the ground, I was going to pick up every one we could. So we were very aggressive during that third phase, and we bought everything we could. And then the hedge funds came in, or the deep pockets came in, and it instantly changed, right?
So what's phase 4?
Phase 4 is the return, right? So we come out of the bottom. Hedge funds come in and say, thou shalt buy everything that REO agents have. I went from getting 1 deal a week to getting nothing for 2.5 months, because it just changed. They were buying stuff. They basically got to every REO agent, so stuff never made it to the MLS. Right. And then that was a return. And, we came into the seller's market that we are now, I believe, just rolling over and coming out of. So, so the up, the rollover, the crash, the return, and now I think we're rolling over again as we speak.
Awesome. Well, listen, you've added a ton of value, Michael. It's been my absolute pleasure to get to know you a little bit. And we will have all your information on the show notes. And I'm very grateful for you taking your very valuable time to be on my show today. And let's stay in touch, my friend.
All right. Take care, Rod. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Lifetime Cash Flow Through Real Estate Investing podcast. If you've enjoyed the show, please take a minute to visit iTunes and leave your comments. For more resources or to connect with us further, please visit our website at rodkhleif.com. Tune in next week for our next show.